Welcome back to Sophie and Sebastian. Congrats to our coloring contest winners, Alexis and Clara, and stay tuned after the story to hear a limerick about each of your names. But first, let's get to our story, in which Sophie and Sebastian take Mrs. Wilson to the zoo. This story is called At the Zoo. One day, Sophie lay sprawled out on the couch. She had been thinking about things. "Mum," said Sophie, "guess what? Did you know that before there was anything, there was nothing? Everything was black, but you couldn't see that because it was too dark to see. Plus you weren't alive, so you couldn't see that there was nothing to see. Well, except God, of course. If you could see him, which you couldn't because you didn't exist. Did you know that, Mum?" "Just wait, Sophie," said Mum. "I'm on the phone." "Why are you always on the phone?" "Just wait." "But, Mum, I'm so hungry. Can we have a snack?" "Just wait." Finally, Mum got off the phone. "That was Mrs. Wilson," she said. "She's coming with us to the zoo." "Yippee-yay!" shouted Sophie. Yet when Mrs. Wilson got into the van a little later, she was in for a surprise. There was Sebastian, all buckled up, but Sophie looked a little different. "Sophie," she said, "is that you?" Sophie was wearing a monkey costume from the dress-up drawer. It covered her whole body. All you could see was her face. "Look, I'm a monkey," said Sophie to Mrs. Wilson. "Ee! "You are a funky monkey," said Mrs. Wilson. "Hey, that rhymes," said Sophie. "Let's make up a song about going to the zoo." So they came up with this silly song. "Oobly-doobly-doo, we're going to the zoo. We want to see the cage or tree in which they're keeping you." Whenever she came to the last line, Sophie pointed at someone. "Imagine," she said, "if we were in the zoo and all the animals came to look at us. Wouldn't that be funny?" "That would be funny," said Mum. They had arrived at the zoo. Mrs. Wilson was a little sore, so she sat in a wheelchair, and Sophie got to push her. Sebastian went in the stroller. Then they had to snake through the lineup to pay for admission. A lot of people laughed to see a monkey pushing a wheelchair. At the booth, Mum asked how much it cost to let a monkey into the zoo. "You're in luck," said the lady. "We have a special deal today. Monkeys get in for free." "What if I was a lion or a ladybug?" asked Sophie. "Wait a minute," said the lady. "Can you talk? Are you a talking monkey? Talking monkeys have to pay full price." "Ee!" said Sophie, and she danced like a monkey. "Must be just a regular monkey," said the lady. "Come on in." Once they were in the zoo, Sophie pushed Mrs. Wilson to all the exhibits. "I can be the guide," said Sophie, "and tell you what you are seeing." Mrs. Wilson said that was a splendid idea. "These animals on the right," said Sophie, "are the porcupines." "You mean porcupines?" said Mum. "No, porcupines. They are pokey like pine cones, so that's what I call them." "They look very prickly," said Mrs. Wilson. "That's because they don't like it if you hug them." Mrs. Wilson was impressed. "Now we're going to visit the peacocks," said Sophie. "I think they're called peacocks because they pee a lot." One of the peacocks came up to the fence and spread his feathers. "Look at all the colorful eyes," said Mrs. Wilson. "I wonder what they're for." "Oh," said Sophie, "those are just pretend eyes. Peacocks don't like it if you steal their feathers. so they pretend to watch you." In this way, Sophie explained all the animals in the zoo. They passed the parrots and the parakeets, the penguins and the polar bears, the ant-eaters and the antelopes. Sometimes Sophie made up a funny poem, like this one. "The laugh of the hyena doesn't mean that he's seen ya. It means that you are dead, and he's chewing on your head." "Isn't that funny?" asked Sophie. "In a dark sort of way," said Mrs. Wilson. Then Mrs. Wilson also shared some funny poems, like this one about owls. "The foulest of the foul has got to be the owl. The owl eats mice, it even tastes them twice. Want to see? Go stand beneath its tree." Then Mrs. Wilson explained that when an owl eats a mouse, it doesn't like to have all the bones in its stomach. That's why the owl pukes them back out again. "That's gross," said Sophie. "I wouldn't want to be an owl." And so they walked on, admiring all the animals. Finally, they got to the monkeys. A dozen little monkeys were swinging in the trees or basking in the sun. "What can you tell me about the monkeys?" said Mrs. Wilson. "I don't know," said Sophie, "but I can ask them where they come from." Sophie went up to the fence and shouted, "Ee, ee!" A lot of people were watching, but she did not mind. Then she did a little dance, and sure enough, one of the monkeys came over to take a look. "Ee, ee!" said Sophie. The monkey squawked and gestured wildly. "It's actually my cousin," said Sophie. "His name is Oobly Boobly, and they captured him in Bongo Bongo by the waters of the Zamboni." A little girl who had been listening to Sophie said, "Did the man who captured him have a yellow hat?" "Good question," said Sophie. "I will ask." She turned to the monkey and said, "Ooh, ooh, ah, ah, ee, ee." A group of people from a different country were watching Sophie curiously. They were waiting for their tour guide to come back from the washroom. Some of them took a picture of Sophie. Meanwhile, Oobly Boobly made some noises and sat down. "He doesn't know anything about a yellow hat," said Sophie. "He says he was just going about his business. But now he's bored." As Sophie was talking, more monkeys came over to take a look. "They would like to see a show," said Sophie. "We can do a show," said a boy who was licking an ice cream cone. "Of course we can," said Sophie. "Who would like to do a trick?" "I can stand on my head," said the boy. "Go for it," said Sophie. "I will hold your ice cream cone." So the boy stood on his head and everyone clapped. Then a man said, "I can do a one-handed push-up with a small child on my back." "Ooh, we'd like to see that," people said. Pretty soon everybody was joining in. One woman was juggling a ball, a wallet, and a soft drink. An elderly couple were swinging a skipping rope for the little ones. Two older boys on skateboards slid down a railing before splashing into a water fountain and starting a water fight. Mum said to Mrs. Wilson, "I guess all it takes is one goofy kid." "I've never had so much fun," said Mrs. Wilson. The monkeys seemed to enjoy all the nuttiness. The people from a faraway country took a lot of pictures. When the tour guide came back from the bathroom, she couldn't believe her eyes. People were going crazy. It even looked like one of the monkeys had escaped and was playing leapfrog with a crowd of children. The other monkeys were jumping up and down and making a ruckus. Then the escaped monkey turned and said, "Can I borrow your microphone?" "Huh? What?" said the tour guide. "Do you mind if I borrow your microphone?" Sure, why not? The tour guide didn't know what to say. But the monkey did. Listen up, everybody, she shouted into the microphone. The monkeys would like to thank you for the show. My cousin says that they still miss Bongo Bongo by the waters of the Zamboni, but they are happy here as long as you are happy. They could use a few more bananas, though. And now we will finish with a song and dance. Then Sophie sang the song and everyone joined in. Are you spunky? Are you chunky? Come and do the funky monkey. Ooh, 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 ah, ah, ah. Who would like a banana? Mrs. Wilson had tears rolling down her cheek. She was laughing so hard. Finally, Sophie said over the microphone, Thank you, everybody. Have a nice rest of your life. Bye-bye. Then she gave back the microphone and said, Thank you for letting me be the guide. I hope you didn't mind. Not at all, said the real guide. I have learned a lot. Well, said Sophie, it wasn't just learning. Sometimes it's good just to have fun. By this time, Sophie was feeling hot in the monkey costume, so she took it off. Can I wear it? Asked the little boy who had stood on his head. Sure, why not? Said Sophie. Then Sophie said to Mrs. Wilson, Well, there's nothing to see here anymore. Let's move on. And that's what they did, though this time Sebastian got to push. Thank you for listening, and as promised, let's celebrate our coloring contest winners, Alexis and Clara, with a limerick each. Now, a limerick is just a funny 5-line poem, and you can try write your own. We will post some instructions on our Facebook page. First, here's a limerick about Clara. There once was a girl named Clara who was walking across the Sahara, when she stopped in her tracks and she searched all her packs, for she feared she forgot her mascara. Next, we have a limerick for Alexis. By the way, if you find some of the words difficult, just ask your mum or dad to explain them. Okay, so here's a limerick for Alexis. There once was a girl named Alexis who dated a fellow from Texas. He was real tall, but he spoke with a drawl, so she punched him in the solar plexus. There you go. Thanks to everyone for participating in our coloring contest. It was a ton of fun. And if you do write a limerick, why not share it with us? See you next time.